We are here today in the all-new G20 3 Series doing our subwoofer upgrade, which is going to be, it's not quite as plug and play as most vehicles, as BMW has elected to glue these subwoofers in. The good news is the fit is still perfect, and we're going to be running you through how to get the enclosure out and our subwoofer in to replace those dinky factory subwoofers and go with our Bavsound improved subwoofer upgrade, which is going to transform the bass response in this vehicle. So diving into that, what we have with us here is our Bavsound underseat subwoofer toolkit. This includes everything that you need to get access to these subwoofers in a convenient little package. It is an option while checking out. And what we're going to start with is our ratchet, extension, and Torx T50 bit. So we are first going to be getting to the front two seat bolts on the rails. You can push the seat all the way back to gain access, and it's these two Torx T50 bolts here. These plastic covers do not need to come off. So with these two bolts out, we can slide the seat forward like so. Oh, you might have to press your start button to get power back to it. And then you can give the seat a little bit of forward lean as well. And we'll take a second here to readjust our shot and meet you in the back of the car. All right. I don't think you'll be able to get that in there, guy. We have our 4 seat bolts removed, again with our Torx T50 bit, and the seat is ready to be leaned back. You do want to take out the rear bolts last, as the seat rails being further back there will give the seat a good pivot point. And so what we'll do is you'll slide the seat back slightly, like so, and then lean it backwards. And then if you want to come in on the seat headrest, a little trick here to hold it out of the way, if you take the rear seat belt and wrap it around there, you'll notice that keeps it out of the way and gives us access to the subwoofer and its grill under the seat. If you want to show them, there is that wiring running to that yellow plug. You don't want to unplug that, as that will set off an airbag light in the car. If you do that, it's not a huge deal, but we want to leave that connected, just as that will prevent you having to go to a dealer or your buddy's shop to have that reset. So we have our bit driver with our Torx T20 bit, and we'll go ahead and get these 4 screws out and this plastic cover out of the way. With our 4 screws removed, this plastic cover comes off and out of the way, and that gives us access to the subwoofer. There is a plug right here, which we'll go ahead and remove now. You can remove this once the enclosure is loose, and it'll be a little easier. There's this little white tab there. If you can see, it's on top of the 2 wires. That needs to be pushed inwards towards the subwoofer for that plug to release. So like that, the plug just comes out. You can just push that out of the way. I like to tuck into that carpet over there. And that gives us, or brings us to 2 10mm nuts holding this subwoofer enclosure in place. We include a 10mm socket in the toolkit to get to those. Oh. And again, might be hard to see on camera, but it's a 10mm nut there, 10mm nut here. We're going to go ahead and remove these, at which point we will be ready to get this enclosure out and bring it over to our workbench. With our 2 10mm nuts removed, again right here and right here, this enclosure is ready to come out. The way we will do that is you'll just grab onto it and lift upwards. Remember to have that connection already taken out over here, or do that now. There is 2 additional Let's see if we can get this on camera here, Kobe. There's a wiring running across it that's held in with these 2 white clips. Those will just come directly outwards. And I'll show you the design here once we get the enclosure out, or maybe we can capture this one a little better. So you can see, you just come in beneath it, it's just a pressure fit. Probably pushing that into the carpet to show it on camera here. They really aren't that difficult. Like so. So you'll see there's these 2 little holes that goes into, and it's just these ends here. You can see they got a little bent up, but it'll grab going back in that go into those holes. All right, with the subwoofer enclosure out, we're going to take this over to our bench and we will show you how to get this removed. With your factory subwoofer enclosure out, you get a real good look at this kind of dinky subwoofer BMW has elected to glue into place in this plastic enclosure. So unfortunately, unlike previous designs with screws and a gasket, they have went to a full adhesive surround on this. The design is the same, so we're still able to use our subwoofers in it. In this case, this is a standard HiFi car. We're using the 2 ohm units, but we do have to get this out of the way to put our subwoofer in. There's a few things to talk about in this. The first being, just as you're gonna want to smash your head against the wall if you miss these, there's these 4 plastic tabs that go over this outer lip of the subwoofer. These must be bent back out of the way to give it clearance to get out, otherwise that adhesive will not release. These are not necessary to the installation of our design, so if for some reason you did end up having that bend so far it won't come back in, that is okay. Obviously you can try not to, but just make sure those are out of the way there. So with these out of the way, we're going to go ahead and start applying heat around the perimeter of this. You can see there's adhesive around the whole perimeter, and we're going to start applying heat on this back side. Again, you can see it, but just around this outer rim of the subwoofer. And then we're going to come from the front. We want to use on our heat gun, we're going to use the low setting, and you'll want to kind of tap it with your finger intermittently to feel the heat. We don't need it boiling hot. If you start to feel that the plastic is getting soft or you see any discoloration of the plastic, you'll want to back off on the heat in that area. Again, you're not really going to miss this factory subwoofer should you end up damaging it, but you really don't want to damage this plastic enclosure, as BMW only sells it as a full unit, so if you end up melting this, you have to rebuy the sub as well, which isn't ideal. That said, it's not that difficult, and I'll show you what to do now. So we're going to grab our heat gun, put that on the low setting. I'll take a minute to come up. And then just in a circular pattern, start heating this whole area up. And you want to make sure to give a little extra in around that plug area, and we'll get that from the top as well. If you notice, I'm not right up on things and I'm moving around. You don't want to sit in one area too long, as that's going to go ahead and introduce the possibility that you'll end up melting some of this plastic, which we don't want. We're just trying to get it warm so that this adhesive releases. So you can kind of feel with your hand, it's already decently warm in this case, but we'll keep going here. And again, depending on what you're using, as far as the heat gun goes, this time may vary, as the temp will vary in between heat guns. Or if you're trying to make this work with a hairdryer, you'll probably have to go even longer than we're showing here. So that's starting to get pretty warm. So we're going to do one more pass. Then flip it over, and we'll get it from the top, again, just around this outside perimeter. Still a little cool on this side, so we'll do a couple more cycles. Starting to get warm. Once it's hot to the touch, that's about when you want to try this. And what I'm going to do before we start prying here is just do one more, maybe even two more cycles on the back, just so that it's evenly heated. Again, really give some concentration of that plug area, although we're going to start prying on the opposite side to it. So what we'll want to do, you can see here I'm going around just slowly moving it. Again, we're on low heat. You don't want to melt any of this plastic. We just need to get this adhesive to soften up. So for about a minute on each side, or until it's hot but not too hot to touch, we'll just keep going in this circular pattern. Again, make sure to get around the plug area. Although we don't want to start prying there, as that is the most fragile part of the subwoofer, as it's just sort of an extension of it. So I like to go around the front first, and then I'll move to the rear before prying. Again, just getting the heat nice and evenly spread throughout here. Again, you can kind of feel, so that is hot and ready to go. So what we want to do, you can see we tried a few different methods before finding the one that works here. But you'll take our screwdriver, make sure this is out of the way, and just pry in here and get that subwoofer to start to release. You can see that going. Come back in. And usually once it starts to lift on one side like it has, you can just push up from the back, and boom, that pops out. And we are ready to install our Bavsound subwoofer. So with the factory subwoofer out, we are ready to put our Bavsound subwoofer in, which comes with this nice thick gasket pre-applied for you that's going to seal up perfectly in place of the factory adhesive. So we'll go ahead and put this in. So we just want the subwoofer pushed down as far as we can on this plug side. As you'll sort of see, if it's more so like that, it risks not sealing on that surface. There's not a ton of movement in here, but again, just take your fingers, push it down towards that plug. So for this next part, we've included these self-tapping screws. We're going to be using, in this case, it's a little impact driver. You could use a drill. If you're using a drill, or in the case of the impact driver, go light on the trigger, or make sure the drill is set to a lower torque setting so that you are not going to strip this out once it starts biting. We need a firm hold, but these don't have to be overly tight. It's just enough to compress the gasket to form a good seal. So we'll take that, put it in our hole. Maybe you can put that on the bit first to avoid what I just did there. And then straight down, again, before you start drilling, make sure this is pushed downwards. So we'll just go ahead and get that through first and leave it as so, and then we'll move around and do our other 4 screws. We'll want to go in kind of a star pattern here. So we'll come and do this guy next. And you can see I'm not snugging this all the way down yet. So what I'm actually gonna recommend you guys do here, just to prevent stripping this out, as that would create a really bad day. Once you get to this point where they've been started with the drill, just as it's hard to get that front of the self-tapper going, finish this off with the hand tool. So we're gonna pause, I'm gonna grab that and show you how to do so. So with all of our self-tapping screws started with the drill, but not snugged down, because we're gonna go through and do it by hand, just as it would be a real bummer to strip one of these out. What I like to do from here, again, we're gonna work in a star pattern, is you can push down and kind of, you'll see, put a little tension on the gasket with your thumb, and then just go until this gets snug. Again, I'm just using my fingertips. As soon as you feel some increased resistance, that's it, we're done. You can see in here, we're just trying to get a little bit of compression on this gasket. We don't need to fully compress it. It just has to be enough to form a seal. So we'll move over here. Again, you can put a little pressure on to ease things. All right, we got that additional tension. So these two are good. And we're gonna move on to this one. I'll be honest, I said to do that with your thumb. It's not doing much, so maybe don't worry about that. But again, just with your fingertips, that one got tight on us, so we are good there. And this last one here. All right, so that is snug. You can feel it is firmly in place. That gasket is forming a good seal. And again, you don't need to compress that fully, just enough to form a tight seal, and we are good. And I'll kind of show you so you can see on the back side where our screws came through. You can pick a little bit of the plastic off so you can get an idea for how much is actually coming through there. These couple come on the outside. And we are ready to go install this back into your BMW. With our beautiful new Bavsound subwoofer installed in your factory enclosure, we are ready to reinstall this. I just wanted to take a second to talk about what we're doing and what's important here. So there's this gasket here, which seals to the floor of the car, and this gasket here, which seals to a port on the side that actually enlarges the enclosure. It's very important both of these get a good seal, and as you're installing it, you don't want to drag it with so much downward force that you would dislodge this gasket. They're on there with a good adhesive and they're pretty resilient. Just something to talk about, you know, if you're getting resistance, try to change the angle a little bit, don't just drag it through that. So the way to get it back in, and if you remember, I'll wait a second so the camera can focus on this, there's this wiring here which will have to pop back into its slot. You want to get under that, and then just kind of work this enclosure in, and kind of fold the carpet back. Like so, and then you'll kind of feel around and it will eventually find a slot in here. Sometimes it's a little easier said than done. So you'll feel it when it lines up on the studs and clears this. It is a tight clearance, but when it clears that, you can feel that it's firmly in place. So we'll want to go ahead, and this is going to be very hard to capture on video, but you can feel it. You'll pop this wiring and its white clips back into those two holes on the front of the enclosure, so that is secure. Then we'll take our plug. This is very important, otherwise you'll have no audio. And go ahead and plug it down and in. And then at that point, we have to put these two 10 millimeter nuts back on. One thing to note there, since we are compressing that gasket and this is a soft plastic, you'll just want to go snug on these two nuts. You don't need to go overly tight, as that risks deforming this plastic or over compressing the gasket, resulting in a plastic on metal sort of sound, which you don't want. So again, just snug on these, and once I snug those down, I'll join you back and talk through the rest of the process. All right, so with the screws on, and I've already got the other one at the appropriate tension, I just want to show you here, you don't want to fully grip on this and tighten down. You'll just kind of go until you get that little bit of extra tension, about there is right. You know, I don't know if you can see here, really not much force. You don't need to crank this all the way down. You can make sure this one is at the same amount of tension, about there, and you are good. Again, snug does it, doesn't have to be cranked. So the next thing to do, you can see this is kind of moved around. There's a little slot over here for the wiring. You might have to adjust your seat a little bit. And you can get this all back into place once the cover's on. But we basically need to get the carpet to sit flat enough to secure this plastic cover. There's these little tabs, or I shouldn't say tabs, these little poles that the screws go into, and you want to get that lined up. I'm actually going to take a second here, and I'm glad you guys are seeing this, to readjust the seat slightly forward so that the wiring doesn't have tension on it. So we'll get this lined up, and it'll be a little easier for you to see, but this is on its post, and we'll go ahead and get that snug down with our Torx T20. All right, so with all these lined up and these screws snug down, and just in the sake of full transparency here, they can be a little bit hard to get to line up. You can look down if you have a flashlight and see if it's lined up with the pole or not. Again, the carpet's gonna fight it a little bit at first, but once you get them all in and snug down, we are good to go. And it's ready to, or it's time to put the seat down. So what you'll do, you can unhook that seat belt so it can move forward, and we will want to guide this wiring back into its hole there. So kind of do it all in one motion. And in this case, we'll be starting at those rear Torx T50 bolts. So we'll join you back there. I mean, there's not too much to this. We'll kind of see, maybe we don't even film it, but essentially we're just reinserting the bolts at this point and snugging them down to 45 foot-pounds of torque. All right, so we've got our 3 other seat bolts in, and we are coming up on this final one up here. And I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the actual BMW procedure and what is recommended, and then sort of what your real-world experience might be. So per BMW, these seat bolts are supposed to be replaced in every use. That, talking to BMW techs across the US, the shops we work at, that doesn't necessarily always happen. It's sort of a overly precautionary thing on their end. If you wanted to do this 100% by the book, you will want to replace these bolts. They're available at your local BMW dealer, and you will want to torque them to 45 foot-pounds with a torque wrench. The reality of it is that doesn't happen just about anywhere, but just wanted you to be aware of that information so you can make that decision yourself. What I will show you with our tool, which is how the majority of you will be installing this, what 45 foot-pounds looks like, and talk a little bit about the science behind it. So we'll go ahead and get this all the way snug down first. So with that snug, this would be where you would bring in a torque wrench if you owned one. It's just cost prohibitive for us to ship that out, especially as a lot of you may have one already. And talking about torque and the foot-pounds, the way that is measured, so when you hear 45 foot-pounds of torque, that would mean if this was 1 foot from the point that it is connecting to the bolt to the end of the wrench, if you put 45 pounds on it and then went until it connected, that is how 45 foot-pounds is measured. This is closer to 8 inches in this case. So, you know, that math, it's about 2/3, you know, you want to be a little over the 60-ish range to get an equivalent torque. So what that looks like as you're tightening it down, when you'll pull, you'll just kind of go until it snugs, and you want to put about 60 pounds of force on there. That can be hard to guess, obviously, and this is where, you know, a torque wrench would be recommended. But what you can do, you'll feel the bolt stop moving completely and get a lot of resistance. You don't need to push past here, as that will start to stretch the bolt, but you want it good and tight. This is not snug like some of the rest of the installation. These are your seat bolts holding the seat down, so you really do want these tight. With that said, that installation is now completed and you get to enjoy your Ghost subwoofers. I did want to take a moment to restate the 20-hour break-in period. You'll have got an email from us about this. When you first put them in, they're going to sound a little muted at certain frequencies. That is normal. They're going to open up and you're going to find they're much more dynamic after 20 hours of listening, which is standard across high-end subwoofers. With that said, it is time for you to go enjoy these subwoofers. So with these subwoofers installed, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the settings on your radio. So you can see here, there's a couple little things. You can move this around, 1 to 3 notches in either direction, depending on what your preference is there. Going much past that isn't necessarily going to hurt anything, but the radio doesn't do a great job of actually manipulating the signal. So going past about 3 notches in either direction will start to cause some distortion, which on top of not sounding good does risk damage over time. If you're the type of person where you really want a lot of bass, again, you're gonna have to wait through that 20-hour break-in period for these to really open up. From there, rather than just going up on the bass to achieve that, what you can actually do is go down a couple notches on treble and up a couple on bass rather than just maxing the bass out. That will give the effect you are probably after without causing too much distortion. For most average listeners, just right in the middle is going to be good and get you the most accurate reproduction of sound. In these volume settings, we recommend speed volume to be all the way down, as that's going to, what speed volume basically does is it increases treble and bass at the same time as speed goes up. Doesn't sound great, so you want that down. PDC and gong is your personal choice, and that is what you need to set up this in a standard hi-fi car. For those of you with Harman Kardon, you're also going to have a full band equalizer. Again, on that front, we don't really recommend running much. You can go 1 or 2 steps in either direction depending on personal preference. With that said, enjoy those subwoofers, get through that 20-hour break-in period, have them open up, and enjoy great sound in your BMW.